These are the 10 biggest, most important news stories of 2014, according to me. Number 10. The deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner. The police caused deaths of two unarmed African-American men, Eric Garner in New York and Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, shows that a lot of police departments in America need some significant reform, especially when it comes to the area of race relations. The heavily armed, extreme responsive officers to the protests in Ferguson was especially disturbing. Mass protests were held throughout the country when the officers responsible for both killings were not indicted by grand juries, a year after George Zimmerman was acquitted of murder by a Florida jury for killing Trayvon Martin. Number 9. 2014 was the year man first landed on a comet, hurtling through space at 84,000 miles per hour. The Rosetta space probe was launched by the European Space Agency in March. It successfully began orbiting Comet 67P in August and set down its lander, Philae, on the surface of the 2.5-mile wide rock on the 12th of November. Through its findings, scientists determined that Earth's water is unlikely to have originated from comets like 67P because the ratio of heavy water to normal water on the comet is more than 3 times that on Earth. The 8th biggest story of the year, in my opinion, was Israel's launching of Operation Protective Edge against the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, with the stated aim of destroying the vast tunnel network and stopping rocket attacks into Israel, which had increased after Israel cracked down on Hamas in the West Bank following the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers. The operation included a ground invasion by the Israeli military and lasted a total of 50 days during the summer, causing the deaths of more than 2,200 people, most of them Gazans. Israel also destroyed more than 17,000 Gazan homes. Number 7. The biggest mystery of the year, maybe of the decade, was the plane filled with 239 passengers that took off but never landed, at least not anywhere anyone could find it. The incident spawned all sorts of unofficial theories, but in the end, after the most expensive search in aviation history, the Malaysian government concluded that flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean, even though the aircraft still hasn't been found. Number 6. This probably should be higher on the list, but President Obama's decision to normalize relations with Cuba is an incredibly historic event. The punishing official U.S. stance toward Cuba had long outgrown its usefulness, if it was ever useful at all. While we won't know the full effects of this news for some time, what is certain is that when the embargo eventually ends, and despite what some out-of-touch members of Congress say, it will be ending soon, the Cuban market will be opened up to American business, finally allowing the Cuban people opportunities that have been closed to them for nearly 60 years. Number 5. On January 1st, 2014, millions of Americans who had been without health insurance suddenly became insured, thanks to Obamacare. 7 years after Senators Obama and Clinton made healthcare reform a central issue of their heated presidential campaign, 4 years after the law was passed, a year and a half after it survived the Supreme Court, and a few months after the completely botched rollout of the website, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act went into full effect, providing 20 million Americans with health care coverage they wouldn't have had without the law, slashing the percentage of uninsured Americans from 18% to 13.4%. Number 4. With a huge power vacuum in Iraq, after the US's 8-year misadventure there, and a chaotic civil war in neighboring Syria, the conditions were perfect for the extremist group ISIS, or the Islamic State, to rise from the flames and ashes. Throughout the year, the group violently took charge of wide swaths of the area. Governments were helpless to stop them as they seized vehicles, weaponry, and resources like oil and energy-producing dams. Their savagery knew no bounds as journalist after journalist was publicly beheaded, the gruesome murders broadcast for the whole world to see. After threatening to massacre tens of thousands of Yazidis whom they had trapped up on a mountain, President Obama sprung into action, ordering his forces to fight ISIS from the sky and take command of the poorly coordinated Iraq forces on the ground. Number 3. For the first time, man made significant progress in the fight against climate change in 2014. The United States EPA issued its first ever rules for how much its biggest polluters, power plants that burn coal, could pollute. The strong action by the American government motivated China, the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, to commit to peaking its CO2 emissions by 2030, or even earlier. These moves by the world's 2 most powerful economies, which are also its two biggest polluters, sends a firm message to the rest of the world and the energy investment market that it's time to get serious about solving the biggest challenge facing the world today. Number 2. In 2014, the extremely deadly Ebola outbreak grabbed headlines around the world, especially when the virus made its way to the United States and Europe several different times. But Africa is where the disease continues to rage, with parts of West Africa completely overwhelmed by the outbreak. As of December, around 300 people were dying from the virus each week, and over 18,000 had been infected worldwide. This story goes to show that even in these modern times we're living in, we're still very susceptible to the most basic threat to human life: disease. Number 1. After the Ukrainian people overthrew their corrupt government and chose leaders who were friendlier to the West, Russia and its President Vladimir Putin sought to make its former Soviet ally pay. Putin began a high-stakes game of smoke and mirrors, blasting pro-Russian propaganda across the many television networks his government controlled in the region, while not so secretly sending thousands of Russian soldiers, who the Russians said, but no one actually believed, were pro-Russian Ukrainian rebels, across the border to take over the Crimean Peninsula and other parts of eastern Ukraine. Putin's move backfired when a passenger jet with nearly 300 innocent, mainly Dutch civilians on board was shot down in an area where Russian-backed forces were present. It was the deadliest shoot-down incident in aviation history, and it unified the Europeans, giving them the resolve to join President Obama on tough sanctions targeting Russia that have succeeded in significantly weakening its economy. Well, that's my ranking of the top stories of the year. What do you think the top story of 2014 was? You can click on the screen to check out our playlist of videos on each of these stories, or on the right to watch our most current video. Thanks for watching. For TDC, I'm Bryce Plank.